This Marquee Dragon video is sponsored by Shattered Crystal, game codes, and items.
Hello, Marquee Dragon, also known as Marcus Eikenberry in real life. And today I want to get a little bit off topic from video games and talk about some of my, entrepreneurial activities and maybe something that's a little bit, it's kind of a funny story. So back in, let's see, how old was I? I was 24, 25, and I had several side businesses. I had a really good job at the time. I worked for TriMet, which is the bus authority here in Portland, Oregon. And I had a good job. You know, I was making, at that age, 17, 18 bucks an hour as a bus driver. And, you know, good union job. People didn't mess with me. Well, passengers messed with me sometimes, but basically, I liked my job. I made good money, had great benefits, and but I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. And I decided that I was stepping away from this cushy job that I could retire from and take a chance. So what I went into was a computer store. And this was back about 95, and custom-built computers, really big thing. Nowadays, you know, Dell or HP, you know, you just go buy one of the boxes and it's more than enough power. Back then, software really drove the power of machines and gaming rigs. You could never get enough power, and in fact, you'd find that if you bought the most expensive rig out there, then in a year you were upgrading the video card or the processor or the memory, because the games that would come out would just be, they would really drive hardware sales. And so that's what we got into. Loving video games, why not build video game machines? And that's what we did. We were very successful. In fact, I didn't manage money very well. And our success really killed us. I mean, I think we were doing $75,000 a week in sales, and you have that kind of cash flow going through. If you don't know what you're doing, which I didn't, can be quite harmful. And so, several money mistakes later, I ended up selling the business, and there was a couple of events though that helped to cause that to happen, and I didn't sell for a profit. I sold because all of a sudden we couldn't keep up with the demand, we couldn't get the product in and everything, and but we also dealt with used product. And I remember we would buy used hardware all the time, and I would buy motherboards, CPUs, memory, stuff. A lot of times it was from upgrades. You know, when we were upgrading someone's machine so they get the latest and greatest, then we would offer them, you know, 100 bucks, 200 bucks, something like that for their used stuff. And then we would turn around and sell it for, you know, we would try and double our money. And that was usually a pretty good plan, and you'd still be able to sell the stuff at cheaper than what it was brand new. And we had this one guy that come in a lab coat one day. And he pulled out of his pocket a couple of processors and some memory. And these processors were Pentium Pros. Now, Pentium Pro, for those of you that don't know, is like today's Xenon, or Xeon. Xenon's a pinball machine. So it's like today's Xeon. And so it's kind of considered like the business class processor that's high-end CPU for number crunching, not necessarily for games. And the Pentium Pro was the equivalent of that back then. So this guy, you know, we're like, buying used stuff, you had to be careful not to buy anything stolen, and to make sure that everything was, was good. And so this guy, he actually told us, he said that he was upgrading machines on the side. And these were the leftovers from these machines, and a lot of the machines that he upgraded were business class machines. And he had this lab coat, and he looked pretty professional and everything, and we thought, okay, great. So we bought some stuff from him, And we were able to quickly turn it around, sell it again. And then, a couple weeks later, he came in with some more stuff, and I think we bought a couple $1,000s worth of stuff from him the second time. And for us, it was a good deal because the price was right. It wasn't outrageously cheap, but the price was right to where we could turn it around and make some more money. So then anyway, we, after, and I remember this very clearly, after about $13,000 worth over several months of buying from him, we had these guys show up, and they were in trench coats, two guys in trench coats, and they come up to the front counter, whip out their badge, and they say, "Hello, we are Hillsborough Police Intel Detachment." And I'm like going, okay, what do these guys want? They're kind of out of their jurisdiction because I'm in Portland. And Hillsborough, it's a suburb of Portland, but it's not Portland. And I didn't know about, police being able to, go across jurisdictions. But it turns out that these police travel the world and they work on cases where there's been theft from Intel. And so it turns out that this guy in the lab coat was actually stealing the stuff from Intel. And that instantly my heart sunk whenever I heard that. And I was like, oh, holy cow, this is bad because I didn't want to receive anything stolen. I didn't mean to receive anything stolen. And they were talking to me like I could be brought up on criminal charges. So I felt very compelled to cooperate, and in fact did. So they wanted a couple of things. They wanted to know what it is that this guy had sold us, and they wanted to know his information and everything. They also wanted to know if we still had any of the product left, and we did. We had probably about $5,000 worth of the product, and we had to turn it all over to them. We just had to give it to them, so we just had to take the loss. So taking the loss, and I found out that he had done this actually with several other computer stores, so he kept his numbers low so it wouldn't be suspicious that he was coming up with too much volume of stuff. Got brought up in front of a grand jury, had to testify in front of a grand jury, and when I was there is when I found out that there was actually other business owners, computer stores that were there as well, and we had to testify against him. Basically, he was convicted. So he was convicted, and we learned to be very weary of certain things. The criminal element, we didn't want to be involved with that at all. But here's the funny part of this story. So I sell my company, as I was mentioning, and then I didn't really get as much money for it as I needed. I had to go get a day job, and I didn't want to go back to TriMet. I wanted to try something else. And because driving a bus was great and everything, but I decided that it wasn't for me, not for the way I am as an entrepreneur. So I took this temporary job, and this temporary job was with Micron Computers. They had a call center here in town, and had probably about 400 people working the call center. Really big call center, and they had these shifts, and you would share cubes and everything. And I remember my first day there, and I'm in this training class. I have a training class it was a week or 2 weeks long. And my first day there, my lunch got stolen. And I'm like, what the hell? This really pissed me off because I put it in the refrigerator, I had it marked with my name on it, and it was just gone. And we were in an area where, there was no restaurants around or whatnot, and so I went without lunch. And that ticked me off. So the next day, I'm in class and everything, and there's a couple things going on, and or maybe it wasn't the next day, maybe it was the day after, part of my lunch got stolen. I had a can of pop in my lunch, and that got stolen. And this kind of stuff just really ticked me off. I'm like, what kind of place is this to work? So I'm in this training class, and having come from, I'm going to get back around to that, and the problem of theft at this Micron call center. So in training class, I'm going through this stuff, and since I owned a computer store and we were building computers and we were always up on the technology and everything, I knew all of this stuff. And so I'm like, I'm ready to just get on the phones right away and work on that. And but we have this trainer in class, and this guy was a real shit talker. He was such a bullshitter, and it was this whole thing, really is about honesty and theft and stuff like that, and that kind of stuff just rubs me wrong. And so, first day I kept my mouth shut, respect for the teacher. Second day, he's going off on stuff and he's telling the class how stuff works, and he's just wrong, plain old wrong. And so, I'm like, hey, it actually doesn't quite work that way. It works like da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, okay, well, thank you for letting us know. And, a little later in the class, I'm like, hey, it doesn't quite work that way. Or it's actually quite different than that. And so I tell him this, and so I had told him 3 times something, and this was probably second day of class, and I had told him 3 times stuff, and he got a little upset with me, which I can understand that, a student correcting the teacher or whatnot, but I knew what I was talking about, and I knew it well. And so he was giving me a little bit of flack for that, and I decided, okay, well, I will just show him that I'm right, because he was kind of challenging me on that, on whether or not I was actually in the right. So I went and I found some magazine articles and a couple of web pages or whatnot. I printed the stuff out, brought in a magazine, and showed it to him. All the stuff that he was talking about, how he had a incorrect interpretation of it at the very minimum. So he got mad at me for correcting him again. And he says to me something like, if you're so flippin' smart, why don't you get up and teach the class? Well, being the leader that I am, I said, okay. And I got up there and I finished teaching my own class. So I had worked call centers before and stuff like that. Call centers are really crappy jobs. And it doesn't matter whether you're a telephone solicitor or you are doing tech support or whatnot. And we did tech support at our store over the phone all the time and everything. And so, yeah, I taught the rest of the class. And I thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, so what happened is that the managers there recognized that I knew more than this other guy, and they asked me to teach the next class that came in. So I had a week of working the phones before there was another class, and I did that, and lunch got stolen again, and I complained about it several times, and they're like, you just got to lock the shit up at your desk. And I'm like, my God, I want to keep my lunch cold in the refrigerator or a can of pop or whatever, but you just can't. You can't trust it because people were stealing the stuff. In fact, theft was so bad there that you had to take your headset home. You couldn't leave your headset there because it'd get stolen, and the headsets cost like $110. And if you lost it, you had to buy yourself a new one, or you lose your job. And even the computers had locks on the back of them and were chained to the desks. So it's just a really really horrible place to work. So, I get through my first week of being on my own, doing my customer service thing on the phone, not training anyone, and then this next class comes up. So I am all excited, and because I'm actually doing something that I really like, notwithstanding the other stuff that's a problem at this place. But teaching is something I actually really like to do. And so I'm I don't know, arrive about 15 minutes early before the class starts. And I walk in, and the very first person that I see in the very front row is this guy that was selling me all the stolen stuff, except he wasn't wearing a lab coat. And I knew that he went to jail for what he did. And I just couldn't help myself. Sometimes my filter on my mouth just doesn't work. And I say stuff that is highly inappropriate and, that could get me in trouble. And it's just part of my being blunt, and I just can't help myself sometimes, especially when I'm emotional about something. This guy sold me $13,000 worth of stolen stuff, and I'm not sure how much money I lost. It wasn't over that amount, but I lost a lot of money. And I considered that he owed me that money. But I knew I was never getting it because he was a deadbeat. He was a drug addict, we found out. And he wore long sleeves on his lab coat because he was hiding his needle tracks. And so I see him there, and I look at him and I blurt out, "You're out of jail already?" And he says, "Yeah, I got out early for good behavior." Man, and I did this right in front of the class. Half the class was already in there. And I just, I felt really bad about saying that in front of the class, but at the same time, it was like, God, I can't believe that they're hiring people like this. This is the theft problem that we have here. He's going to be the one stealing my lunch tomorrow. So I go down. I still have time before class starts. And I go down and I talk to the manager and I say, "You got to get rid of this guy. This guy stole from me. He did jail time for it, and now you're hiring him. What is that?" So, he's like, "I'm sorry, but we need every warm body we can get." And it's true. It was back, when, tech was really exploding. It was hard to get quality people. And for a call center here, that has like 400 people, they were taking everybody they could get. And there was a lot of weirdos and messed up people that worked there. But as long as they could do the job, they didn't care. So he says to me, "We need every warm body." And I say back to him, "Well, I tell you what, he's gone by the end of the day, or I am." So we get to the end of the day, and the guy's still in my class, and I see this as a huge problem. It's just a huge ethical problem, and I had to stand up for my, for my ethics and morals on this. And I hated the job. I liked teaching, but I hated where I was at. And so I went down and talked to the manager after the class, and I said, "So are you getting rid of him?" And he says, "Nope." I said, "Okay, here's my headset. I'm leaving." And anyway, just kind of an interesting story about, life, what you run into that you don't expect, being an entrepreneur, and having to do some things because as an entrepreneur you have failures. And my first business failed. It was so successful that it killed us. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's what happened. And so that stuff happens, and then you have to do stuff that you don't want to do to make it through to the next thing. Things are all good now, but boy, I've been through some shit. So, anyway, take that for however you will. It's just an interesting story that I wanted to share, and I'll share some more in the future. Anyway, I'm Marcus Eikenberry. Take care. When everyone defines